Five forms of the sonnet. When thinking about literature, our minds usually go to the plays of Shakespeare and Marlowe, or the long winded narrative works of Leo Tolstoy and Fyodor Dostoevsky, or perhaps the novels of Virginia Woolf and Charles Dickens. With poetry acquiring such an independent and profitable identity, it has been largely commodified as a genre today. But if there was one form of poetry that was never concerned about selling, it's the sonnet. The word sonnet is derived from the Italian sonetto, which takes its roots from the Latin sonus, meaning sound. By form, sonnet is usually a poem of 14 lines written in iambic pentameter. For the people who might be new to iambic pentameter, it's when your poem has a rhythm of babam, babam, babam. It has 10 syllables per line with a stressed syllable following every unstressed syllable. Today, we're going to be talking about the history of this form of poetry. The Sicilian sonnet. In the court of the Emperor Frederick II, King of Sicily, bloomed a group of poets hailing from Sicily, southern Italy, and Tuscany, who gave birth to the form of poetry called the sonnet. Emperor Frederick II was a connoisseur of the arts, reigning during the 13th century, under whose patronage literature in Sicily flourished. The creator of the sonnet is the Sicilian poet Giacomo da Lentini. The sonnet then made its journey to Italy, where Francesco Petrarca, aka our very own Petrarch, picked up the form and perfected it. It was his name that was attached to the perfected form, which gained popularity during the Renaissance. The Petrarchan sonnet. Developed in the 14th century, the Petrarchan sonnet would go on to become the standardized and widely popular form of sonnets during the era of early European Renaissance. Let's discuss the formal aspects of the Petrarchan sonnet. It is, like every other sonnet, a 14-line poem which falls into two main parts: an octave, that is a stanza of 8 lines, and a sestet, a stanza of 6 lines. Petrarchan sonnets deal with subjects typically relating to unrequited love and the pain caused by it. They present this subject in the form of a problem or a conflict and a solution. The octave lays down the problem and elaborates on it, and the sestet, along with a change in style, provides a solution to the conflict of the octave. The sonnet comes to England. The Petrarchan sonnet, with its exact form and meter, was introduced in the English language by Sir Thomas Wyatt in the early 16th century. He was said to have been a lover or a thwarted lover of Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII, and some of his poems are dedicated to her. Let's read one of Sir Thomas Wyatt's sonnets. Whoso lists to hunt, I know where is an hind, but as for me, alas, I may no more. The vain travail hath wearied me so sore, I am of them that farthest cometh behind. Yet may I, by no means my wearied mind, draw from the deer, but as she fleeth afore, fainting I follow. I leave off therefore, sithence in a net, I seek to hold the wind. Who list her hunt, I put him out of doubt, as well as I may spend his time in vain. And graven with diamonds in letters plain, there is written her fair neck round about. Noli me tangere, for Caesar's I am, and wild for to hold, though I seem tame. Other poets who were practitioners of this form eventually adapted the Petrarchan sonnet into English by changing the rhyme scheme. The original rhyme scheme, or rather the rhyme scheme that Petrarch used in the octave, was ABBA, ABBA. Now, the difference between Italian and English is that Italian has a lot of rhyming words, and English, well, it's not to say that English doesn't have rhyming words, but they're not that many as compared to Italian. And considering the time when Sir Thomas Wyatt was writing, the early 16th century, during this time, English wasn't as reformed and as possessing of a large vocabulary as it does now. There was a lot of use of compound words to make up for the lack of vocabulary. The Shakespearean sonnet. The Earl of Surrey was one of the pioneers of this form of the sonnet, along with Shakespeare. What happened was that the sonnet gained popularity in England, and like most things famous in the Renaissance, this was also picked up by Shakespeare. He put his own twist on the form, structuring the 14 lines into three quatrains and a couplet, with a rhyme scheme of A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, and G G. One of his most famous sonnets, Sonnet 18, which begins with the lines, "Shall I compare thee to summer's day," was based on his then mistress Viola, who was also the inspiration behind parts of his play, Romeo and Juliet, and also inspired the character of Viola in Twelfth Night. Let's read Shakespeare's Sonnet 55, one of my favorites of his. Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princess shall outlive this powerful rhyme. But you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone besmeared with sluttish time. When wasteful war shall statues overturn, and broils root out the work of masonry, nor Mars's sword nor war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory. 'Gainst death and all oblivious enmity shall you pace forth. Your praise shall still find room, even in the eyes of all posterity, that wear this world out to the ending doom. So till the judgment that yourself arise, you live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes. Well, moving on. There was also the emerging trend of sonnet sequences. Shakespeare's sonnets are a part of sonnet sequence dedicated to two figures, the fair youth and the dark lady. Sir Philip Sidney's Astrophil and Stella is also a sonnet sequence. The Spenserian sonnet. Edmund Spenser isn't as big of a contributor to a change in form, but his contribution comes in the form of a link between the quatrains of the English sonnet through the incorporation of a continuing rhyme. The Spenserian sonnet is mainly considered to be a variant of the English sonnet. Later practitioners John Donne and John Milton. John Donne was another major contributor to the sonnet. From the point of its origin up to the Elizabethan era, the sonnet was a poem expressing a jilted lover's pain, or the longing of a lover engaged in amor courtis, or courtly love, with the lady of a royal or aristocratic lineage. John Donne, however, moved the subject of the sonnet from a sensuous experience of love towards religion through his holy sonnets written in the early 17th century. John Milton expanded the scope of the sonnet to other serious matters, giving it a more intellectual tone. Romantic and modern practitioners. The neoclassical era saw a brief disappearance of the sonnet, but the Romantic movement brought it back in full force. Let's just run through a quick list of all of the poets that followed this form. In the 19th century, William Wordsworth, John Keats, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Christina Rossetti, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and in the 20th century, Edna St. Vincent Millay, W.B. Yeats, Dylan Thomas, Robert Frost, and W.H. Auden. Poetry as a whole has had a tremendous history, and the origin and evolution of the sonnet is just a tiny part of it. The sonnet stimulates the poet and the reader not just through the subject matter, but also its form, which is a bit challenging to write and very interesting to read and analyze. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.